Hello, all. This is Matt Rigucci, and we have a great presentation today with Francine Shaw. She's absolutely amazing. She's one of my dearest friends that we've been able to cultivate over the last few years, and this is going to be an amazing presentation. She is a great presenter. She hates me saying this because she feels like it's putting too much pressure on her. But no, she is amazing. You just got back from Dubai, right?
I did. I did a couple weeks ago.
I would love to see you in a burqa.
I thought they were going to make me wear one, but
It's
they didn't.
Dubai. It's Dubai.
Yeah.
So
Saudi Arabia, maybe.
yeah, Saudi Arabia for sure. So as more and more people are coming on board, because we still have some people coming on here, I just want to give some housekeeping. This presentation is going to be a little different than your average webinar. It's not just going to be Francine talking at you for 45 minutes with Q&A at the end. What we like to do is have Q&A go while she is presenting. So as she's presenting, if you have any questions whatsoever, please ask in the little chat box, right? On the side there's a little kind of like cloud looking thing, and that's where you would put your questions, right in the chat box, and I will get to them as we are presenting and ask her those questions so she can answer. So it'll kind of be like a little bit more of a dialogue with your questions being answered throughout it. If you have a question that you forgot to ask in the beginning and you just want to wait till the end, we can do that as well. We'll definitely be answering all your questions as they come up. Again, for those of you who are just showing up, this is Francine Shaw. She is an amazing presenter, and her colors are absolutely just bland. I don't understand why you couldn't put a little bit more work into your logo, Francine, All right, so you know what? For those of you, we still have some people showing up, but for those of you who were here right at time, what we'll do is we will start here with Francine. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we will answer them. We already have a question. The session will be about 45 minutes to an hour, I'm guessing. Yes, Francine?
Yes.
About 45 minutes?
Yeah. I will do my best to keep in that time frame.
Yes. She's a talker. So the longest it will be, we'll cut this off.
I talk fast.
We'll cut it off at an hour. And then also at the end of this, we're going to put it onto our YouTube page and we'll blast it out to everybody as well. And you'll receive an email tomorrow from our software platform here at Webinar Jam with the ability to click on a link and see it as well. With that said, Francine, why don't you talk about yourself and then let's go.
Okay, so I have spent my entire life in the food service industry. Started out when I was very young. My grandparents had a general store. I started on my grandmother's lap, basically, in this general store, which are now known as today's convenience stores. My parents had a grocery store. When I was grade school, I think I was stocking shelves and bagging groceries. Then I spent the next 20 plus years in the food service industry. Started out as a fry girl and worked my way up to executive management. After that, I went into the training industry. And since then, actually, I've got experience in academia, regulatory, and just owning my own company and the consulting side of the industry as well. So there's not a lot in the industry that I haven't experienced, from hiding, things from health inspectors to being the health inspector and knowing where to look for those things. So I know a lot about the food service industry.
You know where the skeletons are hidden because you've probably hidden some of them yourself.
I have. I have. So, I know what happens when a health inspector walks in the door. And as a consultant, it's my job to help companies learn how to not have to do that, because it really doesn't have to be done. Health inspectors want to be your partner. They don't want to be your enemy. They get up with the pants on in the morning just like everybody else does. And they want to be your partner. They don't want to have a bad day. there's a lot of paperwork to that day. So they don't want that. So that being said, we'll go ahead and start with the presentation since I've got 45 minutes, and Matt's going to hold me to that. And already I'm pushing the wrong buttons. Okay, so just to start with a few facts, and I promise not to go through statistics through the entire presentation, but I think that these statistics, what am I doing here? I think that these statistics are important. According to the World Health Organization, there are an estimated 600 million foodborne illnesses globally every single year. And that number I find to be absolutely amazing, especially when you consider the fact that they're 100% preventable. I don't know what I'm... 1 in 10 people around the world are going to get food poisoning. And again, that doesn't have to happen. 1 in 15 people in the United States are going to come down with norovirus. Norovirus is the #1 foodborne illness in the entire world. That's 20 million Americans are going to get norovirus. And we're going to talk about norovirus a little bit later in the presentation. Foodborne illnesses are responsible for 420,000 deaths every single year. And of those, children account for 1/3 of the deaths from foodborne illness. And those kids are usually under the age of 6 or 7 years old because their immune systems have not yet sufficiently developed.
Wow. So that's like 200,000 kids?
Kids, babies, wow. Babies. And I say babies because, you know, we still think of our 6 and 7-year-olds as our babies. I think of my 30-year-old as my baby.
Yeah, I think of my 13-year-old as a baby, yeah.
He doesn't like that, but, you know. So anyway, foodborne diseases are caused by bacteria, parasites, chemicals, viruses, and toxins. And these are introduced to the body through food and water. And some of these are more common in middle and low income countries, while others are globally. In a globalized, because the world has become so small, and we transport food in the manner that we do, these diseases spread very, very quickly around the world. I mean, we transport food, airplanes, cargo ships, trains, and automobiles. So, you know, an illness that starts out, there was a huge listeria outbreak in Africa earlier this year, and it caused a lot of problems. That, I believe, was confined to Africa. But when things like that happen, it's very important to take them seriously because it's not unrealistic to think that they can spread around the world because of the way that our food supply works. And, you know, an illness that starts out in Europe can very easily become America's problem or Asia's problem.
I know you're not talking much about chemicals, too much more about bacteria stuff, but even on the food safety side of the chemical thing, the melamine in China as an incident, where that really, I mean, that affected tons of people, and that was, you know, that was a product from China. Yeah. Right.
And, you know, we hear, you know, Matt, I'm sure you're in the same position. We subscribe to sites that send us links to foodborne illness outbreaks and recalls, and we get dozens of these a week.
Yeah.
And way more than the average population would think actually occur. And it's really scary when you stop and think about it.
Right.
So diarrheal illnesses are the most common foodborne illnesses. And norovirus and non-typhoidal salmonella, they're global. These are global concerns. Enterohemorrhagic Escherichia coli, which is most commonly referred to as E. coli 0157, is primarily found in low-income countries, while Campylobacter is primarily found in high-income countries. Now, it's reasonable to believe that this has to do with dietary habits as well as personal hygiene habits.
I forget, but this is a perfect conversation to be having during people's lunch hours.
I always like to do the foodborne illnesses and the parasites right before lunch. These topics are like the best diet plans ever.
Well, I mean, if you do get norovirus, it is the best diet ever. You lose 20 pounds in 3 days.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to show you why in just a minute. So norovirus in itself is responsible for 550 million illnesses around the world, 230,000 deaths, and 220 million children fall ill, while 96,000 die. And think about this. Norovirus primarily comes from not washing your hands. That's the primary reason for norovirus. It amazes me that there are this many illnesses as a result, primarily, again, from people not washing their hands. It's absolutely crazy. By the time this is over, I'll hit the right button.
So can you go back to those statistics? I never really associate noroviruses with deaths. So that's an interesting statistic for me, because but of course we live in a first world country where we have medical attention and all that stuff. But what are people dying of? Just dehydration and
I was going to, in a later slide, talk about this a little bit more. But yes, primarily dehydration. When the highly susceptible populations get any type of foodborne illness, of course, it hits them much harder than it would your healthy populations. And their bodies just can't withstand the illness because they're going to dehydrate. The illness is going to hit them harder, and they're going to dehydrate as a result of that illness.
Wow.
Again, all of these illnesses are 100% preventable. They're not like heart disease or diabetes or cancer or something that you're just genetically predisposed to getting. They happen because somebody screwed up, bottom line. Somebody made a mistake, and that's why you get a foodborne illness. It doesn't have to happen. So my question is, have you ever had a foodborne illness? And my guess is you probably have. Even if you think the answer to that question is no, more than likely you have, whether you realize you have or not. If you've ever had diarrhea and vomiting at the same time, it was probably a foodborne illness. Matt, foodborne illness?
My diet isn't exactly the greatest, so I think I have foodborne illness probably a little more frequently than the average person. I'm a fan of street tacos and that type of stuff. I go to different countries, and yeah.
Yeah, I stay away from street tacos.
Maybe, I don't know. I've learned that street tacos with tequila tends to keep it down, but
the tequila does not work.
I know.
That's me all the time. Alcohol's gonna kill it. No. Seniors on spring break, I drink enough alcohol, it's going to work. It does not work like that. So no, it doesn't. That doesn't work. But that being said, I have also had a foodborne illness. When I was working in the food service industry, one night we closed and we all went out for pizza afterwards. And this was, Matt, we're just talking about my age before we started. This was a long time ago. Anyway, we went out for pizza afterwards, and this was before they pre-cooked the toppings that went on pizza. So they were cooking the chicken and the sausage and the hamburger from scratch. And it apparently was not all cooked thoroughly before they put it on top of the pizza. And we had ordered what was the equivalent of a meat lover's pizza. Within 24 hours, there were 4 of us that ended up in the ER.
Wow.
Because my stature is I'm not that big. I'm like 5 feet tall, 110 pounds. I dehydrated, as we just talked about, very quickly. The guys, there were 4 of us that were closers. There were 3 guys and myself. They were able to go in, be treated, and released pretty quickly. I ended up having to have IVs and the whole 9 yards. If you've never had a foodborne illness, I'm going to tell you that you are so sick that you not only think you're going to die, you almost want to die because you feel like you're never going to feel human again. It's absolutely horrible. So it's not something that you want yourself, nor do you want to wish it on your worst enemy. Worldwide, norovirus is the number one cause. It's the number one foodborne illness. And not only that, it's the number one cause of foodborne deaths. And that's surprising because, like Matt said earlier, when you hear foodborne illness, you don't always think about people dying, especially from norovirus. And people think that you get a foodborne illness and it's like, you get sick, you vomit, you get diarrhea, you're sick for a couple days and life goes on. And that's not necessarily the case. There are lifelong ramifications from foodborne illnesses. People get heart infections, blood infections, kidney disease, autoimmune diseases, IBS, and reactive arthritis as a result of foodborne illnesses. There was a lady this past summer, I believe it was this past summer, that ate nacho cheese from a convenience store out in California, ended up with botulism. Ugh. And she's still suffering from the ramifications from that illness, and she probably will never recover. So it's not just a matter of, they're going to have diarrhea for a few days and they're going to be okay. You can be sick forever as a result of these foodborne illnesses. So it's something not to take lightly. This is Noroman. I'm very proud of Noroman.
Noroman. I'm glad I didn't have this image when I was putting your page together because this might have gone on that. Oh my God, that's terrible.
Noroman. And the reason Noroman exists is because this is exactly what happens. Symptoms of norovirus are projectile vomiting and explosive diarrhea. That's how it's described. And that is what you end up with. You're sitting on the toilet with a trash can in your lap. It only takes 18 cells for you to end up with norovirus. 18 cells. That's it. And they're minute. So you clearly can't see these cells. The average person is going to end up with norovirus 5 times in their lifetime. 5. So again, odds are you've had it, whether you know you have or not. If you've ever been, in the bathroom talking to the porcelain god, you've had norovirus. Norovirus can live outside the body for several days. And this is why this is so contagious. Your kids go to school and everybody's healthy all summer long. Everybody in the house is great all summer long. Your kids go to school and suddenly everybody in the house is sick.
Right.
And we're coming upon the time of year where that's about to happen. There's a season for norovirus, and that's from October to March. And why do you think that is? Do you know?
Because it's cooler?
Because it's cooler. And what happens when it gets cooler? Everybody moves indoors.
Oh, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Everybody moves indoors. So when everybody moves indoors, all their germs move indoors with them. So we're all in a much closer closed environment. So because these germs can live, this virus can live for such a long period of time, it can live in hotel rooms, on ice buckets and glasses if they're not cleaned properly. All these people that are listening that are travelers.
Yeah, I never even thought of that.
Oh my God. Remote controls. Absolutely filthy remote controls. Don't ever touch the elevator button with your finger. Door keys and doorknobs, not only public, but in your home. When one person gets sick, you touch the faucets, you touch the doorknobs, casino chips and playing cards, countertops, salt and pepper shakers that sit all over the tables in restaurants. In medical facilities, in some areas, they, don't even necessarily have what they need to keep them as sterile or as clean as they should. Sanitized hospitals, street vendors, your tacos. Some street vendors, in all fairness, do a very, very good job.
Yeah.
Restaurants and food prep areas, if they're not cleaned and sanitized thoroughly. And then, of course, handshakes. 1 out of 3 people statistically do not wash their hands when they use the bathroom. So let's say there are 60 people on this webinar, 20 don't wash their hands on a regular basis. And of the ones that do wash their hands, many don't wash them properly. Drying your hands with a paper towel removes about 20% more bacteria than an air dryer. I don't know if you've read any of the studies lately that have come out about air dryers, but they found that they actually cause more damage than they do good because of blowing all the bacteria around the bathroom. And the next time you go into a public restroom that has one of those air dryers, look up underneath it and look at all the grossness that's up underneath the air dryer, because what it does is it sucks all that dirty residue that's on people's hands and in the air up through that vent, and then it blows it back out. That's what happens. And many times when people clean restrooms, they don't clean up underneath that air dryer.
The other thing that just drives me crazy about the air dryer things is a lot of times when they have that, they don't have paper towels. And how am I supposed to open up the bathroom door?
Or the faucets, you should technically use the paper towel to turn off the faucets, because you turned them on with dirty hands. Now you have to turn them off and your hands are clean. Right?
Yeah.
Cell phones are another issue. 1 in 6 cell phones have fecal matter on them. When's the last time you cleaned your cell phone? And how many times do you take your cell phone into the restroom with you? I hear people in the restroom on their cell phones all the time. I don't know if men do this, but women do it constantly.
Men do it.
So and a lot of these cell phones are lying around kitchens.
Right. Well, they're everywhere. I mean, I take my cell phone with me everywhere.
So do I.
Yeah,
we all do.
So it's everywhere. Yeah.
But in a commercial kitchen,
right.
They're texting each other between making that ready to eat salad with and without their gloves on.
Right.
1 trillion germs can live in 1 gram of poo. That's the weight of a paperclip. Pretty amazing. And this is why norovirus is a huge threat within the food service industry. Lack of hand washing, not washing hands properly, vomit spatter, not cleaning up vomit or fecal matter. I mean, when mops are used in the restroom, many times the same mop that's used in the restroom is used in the kitchen. And you're just taking that mop or that mop head, and everything that's on that mop head is then being transferred all over the kitchen. And, that bacteria is just being essentially slung all over the place, for lack of a better.
That's really good. That's a really good point and a good question, because I know I looked at the attendees that said they're going to be online here, and I know a lot of them are from the supply chain, the supplier side, and if they have GFSI audits, they know they have to color code, or at least have designated cleaning equipment for designated areas. Bathrooms are segregated from the kitchen area, segregated from the maintenance area, segregated from the line, etc. And in restaurants, does that not happen? I mean, I remember when I was working in restaurants, it didn't happen. But do they do that now, or is that part of the inspection? Has that been discussed in some of the ServSafe stuff?
It depends on the trainer that's teaching the class. It should be discussed, and it should be a policy procedure. I can honestly say that I don't see it very frequently. When I do see it, I'm incredibly proud of the facility that's doing it. The color-coded mop heads and the mop handles, and it doesn't happen as frequently as it should. And I just think it's an honest oversight. I don't think that it's just something that's I don't think it's thought about. It's not intentional. It's just not really something that's thought about. Or then, they're stored right beside each other,
Right.
So,
but that's a really good point. I mean, you're literally you have the potential of taking the fecal bacteria from the restroom and bringing it into your kitchen.
Well, and in addition, the third-party inspections, I don't see other companies' third-party inspections, but that should absolutely be something that's part of the third-party inspection that's being done. That should be a part of that form, something that's being checked by the inspectors.
Very interesting.
So at this point, there is no cure for norovirus. It just has to run its course. Hand sanitizers are not an effective means against norovirus. Many people carry this stuff everywhere they go. It says on the bottle that it kills 99.99% of bacteria. And it does. 99.99% of bacteria around the world. Does not equal norovirus. What is 0.01% of a bazillion bacteria? It's a really big number. And it also kills good bacteria as well as bad bacteria. And your body needs good bacteria in order to fight off the bad bacteria. It can't distinguish between the two.
Well, a norovirus is not a bacteria, it's a virus.
It's a virus. No, that's correct. But I'm now talking about foodborne illnesses as a whole.
Just as a whole. Okay.
I'm sorry, but thank you for clarifying.
Right.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you for clarifying. In the food service industry, any of the illnesses that we're concerned about, hand sanitizer really isn't effective for a couple reasons. Typically, that your hands are greasy, and it can't penetrate the grease and the things that are on your hand, so it's not effective in that manner, and it's just not effective on the viruses and the bacteria that we deal with in the food service industry. Now, that's not to say that it's not effective at all. Somebody that has a weakened immune system may benefit from hand sanitizer. It's effective against the common cold. It works. It may be effective against the bacteria that you could pick up in the rainforests of South America or the jungles of Africa that you probably don't stand a chance of ever coming in contact with. But for the things that we work with in the food service industry that we're concerned about, it truly isn't effective. If you want to use it after washing your hands, that's fine. But it's not a substitute for washing your hands. And I've seen many occasions where people will just think that, put this hand sanitizer on your hands and we're good to go. I've had school teachers, tell children, you don't need to wash your hands, just use the hand sanitizer. And not a true story.
Right.
So bottom line is wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. Norovirus can persist for days or even weeks on surfaces. Cold, moist conditions are going to help it survive even longer. Hard surfaces such as faucets, counters, walkie-talkies that people use in the industry to communicate between one another, cash registers, and those types of tools, the virus can live on those for up to 12 hours. Soft surfaces, carpets, studies say that the virus can persist for even longer periods of time. So how do we reduce the risk? It seems almost impossible to get rid of this. Not rocket science. Hand washing with soap and water, clean water, can help prevent the spread of disease and save more lives than any single vaccine or medical intervention. And I think that is like the most probably important statement in this entire PowerPoint.
Yeah, it's so funny. You can't go to. I have 7 children, so we deal a lot with vaccines, right? And I can't send my kids to school without their vaccines. We're not an anti-vaccine family with 7 kids. I try to minimize my hospital visits as much as possible. So, but they have to have all their paper records of the vaccinations. But it's going to one of the questions here that was asked. One of the things that I think would be really good is if the schools taught children how to wash their hands. They're so interested in the records of immunization, but they never once is. I can't remember ever any of my children saying that they were taught how to wash their hands or frequently asked to wash their hands by teachers or whatever. And one of the questions here from one of the people is attending is, are they is part of the citizenship and visa programs for the United States, for foreigners coming to the United States, is there food safety and hygiene education? And my thought process is no, there's definitely not. But you would know better than that because you do serve too. There's not. But it's funny as we think about this, like, oh, there's people coming in, they're providing, they come in with hepatitis or whatever, but it's not being taught even in our own schools.
It's not being taught in our homes.
Right.
And that's a fact. Statistically, what we have learned, especially lately, is that many of these children aren't even being taught basic food safety in their homes. So parents aren't teaching their children anymore that they need to wash their hands at home before they handle food, or just your very basic essentials about handling food at home. And if they're not being taught at home and they're not being taught at school, then they're going into the work environment at the age of 15, 16 years old. And employers are thinking, well, they've been taught the basic at home. This is common sense. They're being taught nothing. They don't know. And we can't assume as employers that they do know. I've run into employees lately that they've never been taught how to sweep the floor. I did a workshop for some kids at Bible school a couple weeks ago, and there was a 14-year-old individual in this class, and we were teaching them how to wash dishes in a 3-compartment sink, how to set it up, how to wash, rinse, and sanitize. And this young man came up to the sink and he says, now there were some 5- and 6-year-olds too that said, I've never washed dishes, which, okay.
Yeah.
But there was this like 13, 14-year-old young man that came up to the sink and he said, ma'am, he said, I've never washed dishes. I don't know what to do. And, I'm laughing, but I was just astounded that there's a child that age that's never washed a dish. I mean, it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand maybe at home you don't learn the wash, rinse, sanitize
Right.
principle, but certainly you learn wash, rinse, dry, you
Right.
know, but no, he never ever washed dishes. So children just aren't learning those things at home. We grew up learning how to sweep a floor and,
Well, I
how
don't
to
know about
wash
you, but I
dishes.
grew up in slave labor. I mean,
Me too. You're not leaving the house till the kitchen's clean.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, so the children just aren't being taught these things. So we really need to go back to the basics with just teaching them from start to finish. You can't start mid-level. You need to teach them how to sweep the floor properly, and how to that the drains need to be cleaned, and that the baseboards need to be scrubbed, and that yes, this is how you wash your hands. And as sad as that may seem to some people, that's really what we need to do. We need to form a checklist, and this is how you do it. So, okay, so wash your hands with soap and water. Incidentally, the new food code does not specify a temperature any longer. It just says hot water as hot as you can comfortably stand, I think is what it says, or warm water. There's not a temperature any longer. Apply soap, scrub hands well, rinse, dry, turn off the water with a towel, use a towel to open the door, and then wash your hands again when you get back to the workstation, because if you're touching all those doorknobs, your hands are getting all gross and grimy again on your way back to the workstation. They've been contaminated. If you're in a situation or in a country where water, potable water, and soap are not available, and you have to use sanitizer, it has to have an alcohol-based sanitizer with 60% alcohol. My recommendation is always use the sanitizer wipes, because at least you're pulling that bacteria off your hands, as opposed to putting it on your hands and just rubbing it all over the place, because where's it going? You know what I mean? Just get those wipes where it's at least pulling something off your hands. And again, although these products kill some germs, they're not completely effective against norovirus and don't work well on soil hands, like I said earlier.
I tell my wife all the time we need to use Clorox wipes when we're changing the children's diapers,
Yes.
and she says no, not for our hands. I was like, for the baby, because that stuff is nasty. She's like,
yeah, Clorox is norovirus's best friend. And I'll tell you what, this is something that I struggle with. I understand why food service establishments don't allow Clorox in the establishments, because everybody thinks they're a chemist, and they start mixing. They start mixing products. When I ran my restaurants, it was the same way. People mixed all kinds of stuff together, thinking they were going to get something extra clean when we had bleach in the stores. But bleach is what kills norovirus. So it's a catch-22. So if you want to get rid of the norovirus, if somebody ends up, with diarrheal matter or vomit, that's how you're going to clean it up effectively. But then again, you run the other risks with having bleach in the facilities. 80% of infections are transferred by touch. And, in the last year, I've written, 20, 30 articles on creating a food safety culture. And everybody's talking about a food safety culture. And it can't just be talk. It has to be a commitment to operating a food safety culture. And you need to be proactive, not reactive. A lot of businesses, the majority of businesses, have the attitude of, Chipotle is not going to happen to me. Those kinds of things just don't happen. It's not going to happen to me. And it can. You're all one social media nightmare away from disaster. And you never know when or how it may happen. But one of the ways to eliminate the risk is to create this culture. And it needs to start at the executive level and work its way clear down to that hourly employee level. And that means when an executive walks in the door and they walk into the kitchen, they wash their hands and they put on a hat. We used to get so excited when we got promoted because that meant that we didn't have to wear a hat anymore. Used to think, does that mean our hair quits falling out when we get promoted? And that's not the case. But you need to emulate what you want your employees to do. And not only that, you need to explain to them why. And there needs to be a thorough consistency. I have worked with companies and for companies that, yes, this is what we do. And yes, we have a great food safety culture. And on paper, you do.
Right.
You do. It looks fantastic. But if I walk into the kitchen of one of those units, it may not look exactly like it looks on paper. And I think I know a lot of the problem is that at the hourly level, the employees just aren't getting it. They don't understand. There's not a person out there that wants to make anybody sick intentionally. They don't do it on purpose. They just don't understand. When I was an hourly employee, I knew that the chicken had to go on the bottom shelf, but I didn't know why. Did I put the chicken on the bottom shelf all the time? Not a chance. I put it where I had room. But if I knew that if I put the chicken over that lettuce, it could kill somebody, do you think I would have put it there? No. And I think that a lot gets lost in interpretation and explanation.
It has to be explained the why, explain
always the whys, always the whys, and you're going to get such better results. And we need to make sure that the programs don't get so watered down on the way to the people that actually need to know the information. Your backline cook needs to know why the burger needs to be cooked to 155 degrees or 160 or whatever your policy happens to be. And that the people that are training it understand why that is the case. That is so important. As I talk to the people that perform these jobs, they're sometimes amazed at, wow, I didn't really know that. I had no idea that if I did that, it was going to make somebody sick. So that's important. So how do we create this culture? Food safety is not fun. I'm going to be the first one to tell you it is not. We spend our days talking about diarrhea and vomiting, and I have to tell you, when I was a child, when I never thought, when I grow up, I want to talk about diarrhea and vomiting. You need to make it fun. There is absolutely no reason that it can't be fun. People learn more when they're having fun. This is why my PowerPoint's pink and green. This is why my logo's pink and green. I like to have fun. And
how often do you get kicked under the table by your husband at parties for talking about this stuff? I get kicked under. My wife is like, Matt, shut up. People don't want to hear while they're eating at dinner what you do for a living.
I am very fortunate. I have a very tolerant husband. And I try to be good so that I have a few friends.
Yeah.
That will, I'm going to lose my voice, that will still go out to eat with me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have any.
Yeah.
Because I could be really obnoxious if I wanted to be. Don't eat that. But yeah, there's nothing worse than going out with a group of health inspectors for lunch. Because there's nothing we won't discuss. And we can ruin anybody's meal. But yeah, it has to be fun. And lead by example. Don't just talk the talk, but walk the walk. Explain why it's important. Not just, hey, you can kill somebody, you do that, but how's it going to kill them? Make it interesting. Tell them stories about things that have happened. And and make it believable. And then follow up. If you don't follow up, it's like telling your kids they have a rule, but not following up with that rule, or if they break the rule, because if nobody's going to check after you make a rule, why follow the rule?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. And then, of course, follow up with job aids as well, just as reminders. As far as, and I've talked about this a couple times throughout the presentation, the FDA Food Code recommends that you develop and implement written procedures for employees to follow in responding to vomiting and diarrheal events that involve discharge of vomitous and fecal matter onto surface in food establishments. I can't express how contagious norovirus is. And if you were to put norovirus in your Google search, in the next month, you are going to start to see a phenomenal amount of norovirus outbreaks at restaurants and at schools. You only hear about the big ones on the evening news, but you're going to hear
like the cruise ships and that type of stuff.
Not just cruise ships, but at schools, football teams, colleges, universities, restaurants. Places that you wouldn't even think of. You're going to start to hear about all of those here in the next month or so. They're going to start to become pretty prevalent. You can almost set your watch by it. Scientists are closer than ever developing a vaccine. NoroCore is working very, very hard on this, but they're not there yet. It'll be phenomenal when they do that. And in the meantime, in the food service industry, it is our responsibility to do everything we can to prevent the outbreaks from occurring.
Well, even afterwards, because even if everybody in the United States that could take the vaccine did, there's still a lot of people who can't take vaccines because of their immunocompromised positions. Like
right.
I have friends who have kids that just can't take vaccines because they have different disabilities that make them very sick, and they can't take those vaccines. And so those friends are like, everybody, please get vaccinated because my child can't. Right. And so even after they do come out with the vaccine, we should, as health professionals, also say not everybody is going to be vaccinated. Because my children are vaccinated to things I'm not. Like, I got chickenpox. My kids are vaccinated chickenpox, but there's a lot of people who weren't vaccinated chickenpox.
Right. Well, and not only that, but some of the same bad habits that cause norovirus cause other foodborne illnesses as well.
Yeah, E. coli, salmonella, hepatitis, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah. So, always we need to be proactive. And again, these are all 100% preventable. Never rely on a vaccine to prevent anything. Your due diligence is required as a professional. Right. Every food service operation is going to be different, but all of our goals are the same. And it's to keep our guests safe. So that being said, for more information, you can visit the World Health Organization's website or NoroCore at North Carolina State University. Both of those organizations have a plethora of information, enough that it could really overwhelm you if you get into it too much. But they have a ton of information on those websites. And with that, I thank you for attending today's presentation.
So I do have a couple more questions. One just recently came in. I'll get to that one. But one was previously on, and he was wondering about, you were talking about the different subscriptions that you and I have that tell us about outbreaks and stuff like that. What ones do you use?
The FDA. There's the FDA website. There's I follow the CDC.
CDC is one I follow, yeah.
Those are probably the two primary.
Right. Right, and you can just go on their websites, and actually they have I think both of them do. I know the CDC does. I don't know about the FDA. Even has codes where you can link it to your website. And so some websites will actually have the most recent outbreaks coming on it. I check food safety news.
Every
day. My favorite writer happens to be here right now with me. So you'll be able to see some of her work on food safety news. And also I advertise on food safety news too. So I
check food safety news religiously more than I do those other sites,
right.
Quite frankly.
Yeah, because the other sites you'll get things like somebody found salmonella in a test and they're doing a recall, which really won't impact the average consumer. It's more of an industry-wide thing, which I like because it helps me, my clients, understand what's going on. But food safety news is geared towards industry, but also more geared towards consumers than any other website, I think, for food safety. Would you agree?
Right, and with the FDA, you get every single recall.
Everything.
There is cat food, dog food, car seats. You'll get every recall that's out there.
Glass, chemical, bacteria, anything.
But there's also a very good food section on that website. I guess I use that more for research than anything else. But that being said, food safety news is my first go-to.
Yeah. It's great. I love food safety news. And then the same guy who owns food safety news is Marler. He has a blog where he talks about the legal sides of stuff, and it's what is it called? Marler blog? Is that what it is?
It is. And incidentally, since you brought him up, he's the #1 foodborne illness attorney in the country. And
in the world.
There are so many outbreaks that he just had to hire two more attorneys. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, and it's not just the United States. He deals with companies, outbreaks in the world. Yeah, the Listeria one in South Africa. I think he's working on that one. And so he actually gave a presentation to the Senate, I believe, or to Congress, saying, "Hey, get me out of business. I don't want to deal with food safety outbreaks and talking to these victims." So, create policy that helps minimize this so I don't have a job anymore. But I don't ever foresee that happening.
No.
Even if you create policies, I don't foresee that happening. And then another person wrote a great question here that talked about, and I think this would be more particularly in home, but I could see this also being used in food service as well, are there special washes that you have found that work very well on fresh produce type stuff, things that you can't kill when you cook?
I get asked that question a lot. I always refer people to the FDA website has some recipes for washes, and there are also some very good veggie washes on the market. Yeah, there are some good veggie washes. And I forgot the FDA has a wash on there too, which interestingly enough has a little bit of bleach in it, right? Don't they? There are a couple. One of them has, it depends on how you feel about chemicals. One of them is made with vinegar. There's one out there that you can make a recipe with vinegar. And then there is another recipe that has bleach. But boy, you have to be careful with the bleach. The people that have the personalities that think more is better should not be using the bleach.
Not good.
Stay away from the bleach.
Not good.
Otherwise, the bleach recipes there, if you're somebody that, doesn't like the idea of ingesting chlorine, that probably would not work for you. And then the veggie washes that are on the market are also a good alternative. So it depends on how you feel about chemicals versus vinegar. But the FDA website definitely has at least one recipe on there, if not two. It's a minimal amount of chlorine. I'm a bleach believer.
I have a lot of this. This is another one where I get kicked under the table a lot by my wife, is when people start talking about chemicals, and I'm like, everything is a chemical.
Yes.
Everything is a chemical. Our conversation right now is a chemical reaction. Vinegar is a chemical.
I have ruined more clothes with bleach than you can possibly imagine. I mean, my husband, if you have to buy any more clothes, I just ruin a ton of clothes with bleach. It's crazy because I'm a bleach believer.
I learned that early on in my marriage, was to ruin at least one load of clothes, and I never had to do it again.
Well, this is when I'm cleaning. I'm a bleach freak. So yeah. OCD.
Right. We're a Clorox wipe family. We have those things. We go to Costco, buy like the 3-pack of Clorox wipes, and we have it in every place. And we're just constantly wiping. But I have 7 kids, so my house is like a petri dish, So
I have them.
we're washing everything down all the time.
Yeah, it's what we do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I thank you all for being on here. We are like right at an hour, which is perfect. I think there's going to be an offer that's going to pop up here. You can sign up for a consulting workshop that I'm putting on to teach people how to market and create monthly revenue sources. Not so if you're a consultant and you're interested in that, please sign up. In fact, Francine, I forgot to even tell you about that I'm doing that. So I'll talk to you about that later. But yeah, thank you guys for attending this. We will be posting this on YouTube, and I'll be sending it over to Francine. Francine might post it on her website because she has a lot of media stuff on there. But please go to Francine's website, which is savvyfs.com. And how many articles have you written over the last few years?
Over 100.
There is just a huge resource there in food safety. And I read every one of them that you post and share them on LinkedIn because they're all great. So
Thank you.
For more information, go onto her website. You can see, and she writes for all the major publications in the food industry, not just food safety ones, right? Because you even work. What other ones do you write for? I put you on the spot.
You did, and my mind's just went totally blank. I tend to remember I've written for some in Canada as well.
Well, when you have 100 articles, there's a lot of them. Website, and it's under media and education, isn't it?
Yes, there's a media tab on there, I believe, and they're all under the media tab. There's a tech, I believe. Is it?
I'm looking at it now because you just redid your website. It is, and we'll post all this in the YouTube video as well in the description below. So if you want to see more of her stuff, just look down below. I'm learning this YouTube stuff too. Look down below and you'll find.
I need some lessons. I could use some lessons on YouTube.
Okay, well, thank you guys again, and please let us know what other topics you want to discuss, and we're gonna have Francine back again next week to talk about cross-contamination, prevention of cross-contamination. So we look forward to that, and hopefully y'all could be there as well. All right. Anything else, Francine, before we say goodbye?
I don't think so.
All right. Thank y'all.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.